welcome to our very first Easy Agile Programs Ask Us Anything session. My name is Jasmine Jordanidis and I am the Product Marketing Manager here at Easy Agile. We're just going to wait a couple of moments for more people to join the call and we'll get started shortly. Thanks for your patience. All right, well, we might get started. One of the things that I think is important to mention is we're going to record this call and I'm sure people will join as it proceeds. But today it's our first Easy Agile Programs Ask Us Anything session and we really appreciate any questions that we get through. So one of the questions that we've gotten through is from Jean, who is now present on the call. So Jean, we'll probably start with your question. But before we do, I'd actually like to introduce our Head of Product, Tegan Harbridge. You've probably seen her when you've gotten the email about this session, but Tegan is Head of Product here at Easy Agile. And she is going to take care of answering all of your questions about Easy Agile programs and all the associated questions around safe and agile practices today. So Tegan, did you want to join the stage?
Hello, can you see and hear?
Yeah, all good, all good.
It does.
So given we're still waiting for people to join the call, but Jean is here, and Jean, actually your question was first up for Tegan anyway, so that's worked out quite nicely. So just to recap on your question, it was about Kanban and Scrum. So how to show Kanban and Scrum in a program or a program increment. And also we had another question from Stella, which is related and on topic with this theme, which was about Kanban versus Scrum, which is better. So Tegan, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for sending through your question, Jean, and Stella as well. This is something that we get quite often through support. So it's really good to have an opportunity in the flesh, COVID flesh, to help answer this for you. So what I want to do before taking you into the product and showing you how a Kanban team's work would progress alongside a Scrum's team, I think it's important to just touch on the core concepts of Kanban first, and then a little bit about how Kanban works in SAFe. Then I'll show you how to show that in programs today. And then for finally, which is a really big question, you know, Scrum versus Kanban, which is better, which is really interesting. So generally speaking, Kanban is considered a pull system. So teams pull in work when they have capacity for it, rather than plan the work up front into sprints like a Scrum team would. And the concept of Kanban really hinges off this idea of optimizing for flow. So there's typically WIP limits, so work in progress limits, and they're applied to all of the different workflow states to ensure that that flow is really optimized. So for example, we might have a WIP limit of 1 ticket in a in-review workflow state. And what that means is that the rest of the Kanban team would stop until that one WIP item in review was pushed through our funnel before we would get started on anything new. So it really makes sure that that work is continuously flowing through. When we look at Kanban and SAFe and how it fits together, kind of the key levers to a successful SAFe adoption really are cadence, synchronization, and predictability. And it's easier to understand this cadence when we're looking at Scrum teams because they've got sprints. And so the sprint length might differ from organization to organization, but generally we can synchronize on that. And when we say, you know, we need this item completed by the end of sprint 2, sprint 2 means the same thing for all of the Scrum teams. So it's easy to get a sense of predictability around it. And that's really key to ensuring dependency relationships and managing those dependencies, and we can attain a level of predictability over time. But this isn't necessarily the same when it comes to Kanban teams, and SAFe have a few kind of rules that apply to Kanban teams working in a SAFe environment, and they're basically to try and establish the same cadence and synchronization that we would have for a Scrum team. So for a Kanban team in SAFe, they must attend PI planning with the rest of the teams, system demos and other PI ceremonies, and that's trying to create some level of cadence and predictability. So we can say that, you know, our system demo is in 5 days and everyone will have something to show in 5 days. They're also asked to estimate their work in a way that's consistent with the Scrum teams, and they're asked to add that estimated work into iterations just like Scrum teams would too. So sorry, Jean, this is really long-winded, but I feel like the concepts are really important to establish here first. But I've always really felt like SAFe doesn't have the best answer for Kanban teams, and they essentially just end up working like a Scrum team would anyway, given that they have to estimate work, they have to plan it into iterations and attend these ceremonies. So there is an article that SAFe talks to about how Kanban teams work in SAFe, and I'm sure we'll share that in the comments if we haven't already. So I'm going to jump in. With all that being said, I'm going to jump into programs and show you, Jean, how a Kanban team's work would look progressing alongside the Scrum teams. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so we are currently looking at my Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry program. Apologies if you're not a Harry Potter fan, I am. And we can see that we've got a Gryffindor team, a Hufflepuff team, a Ravenclaw team, and a Slytherin team. All three of these bottom teams are actually Scrum teams, and this top team here, the Gryffindor board, is a Kanban team. And so when we add a Kanban team to a program, it works exactly the same as if we were adding any of the Scrum boards from your Jira instance. So you'd be able to find them in this Team Agile Boards dropdown, and that's where I've got my Gryffindor board. So adding them is the same as adding a Scrum team. If I go into my Gryffindor board, you'll notice that there are sprints at the top of our Kanban team planning board. These aren't tied to Jira software sprints because a Kanban team doesn't have that sprint functionality on their board. What we do in Easy Agile Programs is we create these dummy sprint containers that a Kanban team can place their work into. And the reason that that's important, particularly to how SAFe works, is that by doing that, we're actually able to align this Kanban team's work alongside the Scrum teams as well. If we didn't have this alignment, we wouldn't be able to show these dependency relationships in this way. And so the one thing that you will be missing off a Kanban board that you would get with a Scrum board, so I'll just jump into a Scrum board here, is you can see at the top, under each of our Scrum team sprints, we have this capacity section here, and this is where a Scrum team can say, my typical velocity for a sprint is 20 story points, so they can set that capacity. And as they estimate their work, that capacity will actually bubble up to the top of the sprint. In Jira software, we don't really get this estimation capability for Kanban teams because Kanban teams, the work is typically broken down into pieces that are of the same size, and so there's less value in estimating the work. And so for a Kanban team in programs, you won't actually see that, that capacity module there. So that's kind of how it would progress alongside a Scrum team. I hope that answered your question. I'm sure Jazz will let me know if you've had any other questions. But the second question, which was from Stella, which was Kanban versus Scrum, which is better? I hate when people say this, but it is so true. It really depends. And I'll give you a couple examples of where I've seen Kanban work better for some kinds of teams and where Scrum works better for others. So when we're looking at what the key metric for a Scrum team is, we're looking at velocity. When we're looking at a Kanban team, we're more inclined to be focused on lead time, cycle time, and work in progress. And so with that in mind, estimation has really great value for a Scrum team, where the speed at which your team can work, so your velocity, is really important, and changes into a sprint are meant to be limited. But since Kanban's change philosophy permits a lot more change, estimations become really hard for a Kanban team, and it's not as, doesn't provide as much value. So what I found for Kanban teams, Kanban tends to work better for more mature Agile teams who've been working together for some time. And that's because they have a really good understanding of how to break work down into pieces of the same size. Kanban also works really well for system teams, operation teams, support teams. So teams where priorities are often fast changing and they come in, and so there's really not a whole heap of value planning up front because the priorities are changing all of the time. When we're looking at Scrum typically works better for newer teams, so teams that have just recently formed and they're looking to set a baseline for their capacity. They tend to do better starting off with Scrum. So with that being said, if you're looking to adopt SAFe, I would suggest Scrum. I say that because SAFe basically makes a Kanban team operate like a Scrum team anyway. And if you're using a tool like Jira, you don't get that capacity functionality like you would if you were on a Scrum board. So that's how I would answer that question. I hope that helps, Stella and Jean.
And Jean actually has had a follow-up question from what you've shared. So she's asked, do the sprints for the Kanban team get pushed back into their Jira project?
So no, they don't. And that's because on a Kanban board, you don't, in Jira, Kanban boards don't support sprint functionality. So in Easy Agile Programs, we just create them as a dummy sprint. If you were looking for information on sprints to push back into a Jira board, I would suggest the team moves to a Scrum board.
Cool. Thanks, Tegan. All right, well, we might move on to some of the other questions that we've gotten through as well. So the next question that we had was, how does Easy Agile Programs work with the SAFe 5 framework?
This is a really beefy question. I think this one was from Jesus, so thank you for that, and I hope this helps everyone else on the call. I would start off by looking at what SAFe 5 introduced to the SAFe framework. And that was primarily focused around business agility. So trying to encourage all teams, not just software development teams, to use lean and agile principles. So it's trying to encourage the inclusion of marketing, legal, finance teams onto a release train by creating cross-functional teams. With that being said, that is a ginormous organizational shift, and that's not something that any tool or Easy Agile Programs is going to be able to solve. But where Easy Agile Programs does help with respect to SAFe 5.0 is around what they call competencies. So there are particularly two competencies at the essential SAFe level. So SAFe, big picture, has multiple layers. Essential is the foundation. And the two competencies where programs really helps is around team and technical agility and agile product delivery. So programs really shines when it comes to distributed and virtual PI planning alongside your work in Jira. So it's building on top of the existing primitives that you're used to, like boards and issues and sprints, to introduce a new concept, which is a program and a program increment. And it allows you to meaningfully visualize the work that multiple teams are doing at any given time, which was difficult in Jira prior. Basically, you could pull together a list of issues that multiple teams were working on, and you could see issue links around dependencies. So it was hard to understand what those relationships with dependencies were. And this really speaks to the core competency of Agile product delivery, because it helps the teams to deliver on cadence. When we can see teams working kind of on the same playing field and we can visualize that, it helps us to understand how we can deliver on a set and regular cadence by aligning our sprints. I guess a big criticism of SAFe prior to SAFe 5 was the lack of inclusion of customers. There was no customer presence on the SAFe 5 big picture. And so SAFe 5 introduces concepts like design thinking and customer centricity down at that essential SAFe level as well. While we don't natively have support for personas in programs today, we did release a personas tool to the market, Atlassian Marketplace last year. And the goal of releasing that tool was to help bring your customer voice alongside your backlog. So it would be really great to understand whether, Jesus, you were looking to incorporate more customer centricity and design thinking alongside your PI planning, and whether something like personas in programs would be valuable. So if you are on the call and you wanted to share some feedback on that, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions, maybe even take it offline as well. So hope that helps. Thanks for that question.
Great, thanks, Tegan. So the next one's very much focused on the product itself and the functionality there. And Bob has asked, what's the best way to produce a lighter view of the increment?
Cool, thanks, Bob. I'm not sure if you're on the call either, but I know that we've been back and forward via support and email. So it's nice to, if you are here, to talk to you. Full transparency, we know and acknowledge that there is a lot that we could do to make focusing in on what you care about in programs better than it is today. So currently today, there isn't any filtering capabilities on any of the views in programs, and this is something that we're actively investigating at the moment on how to make it better. But what I can do and share, which might provide some value to you now, is how we've seen other product owners in their PO syncs and other Scrum Masters in their Scrum of Scrums kind of hack the program to get a more focused view of the increment, so a lighter view. So I'm going to share my screen again and jump into programs. Okay, so this is quite a light program increment. This does not replicate what a customer's data set would look like. I've definitely seen extremely large increment overviews where there are up to 30 teams. So you can imagine that with that scale of teams and issues, that this page does become quite populated. And I guess this is where Bob's question is stemming from, how to get a lighter version of this view. So what we've seen from other product owners and Scrum Masters when trying to get a lighter view of the increment is, rather than using this screen, rather than using the increment overview, what they'll do is they'll actually go into their own board. So say I'm the product owner for the Gryffindor board. I'll go into my Gryffindor team planning and I will open the teams drop down, and I'll look at which of the teams within my program increment I have dependencies on or have dependencies on me. And the way that we can identify whether that's the case is whether there are any coloured pills that sit alongside that team's name. So we can see here that we don't have any dependencies, or they don't have any dependencies on us, nor do Ravenclaw, but the Hufflepuff team do. So I'm going to add them into my, my view. I'll collapse this. And if I scroll, I can see where those dependencies are and on what issues. Now, in order to get a lighter view, what I might do is I might only be interested in the blocker dependencies, so the red dependencies. So I don't want the clutter of any yellow or green dependency lines. So what I can do then is, in the dependencies dropdown, I can turn off healthy and at-risk dependency lines just to focus in on what those blocker issues are. So I know that it's not ideal. It is one way that you can achieve a lighter view. Our product manager for programs, Elizabeth, is on the call as well, and I know that she's looking into this at the moment. It's something that we would like to deliver in the first half of this year. So if you wanted to get in contact with her, leave your interest in the comments and she'll reach out to you. We'll throw a free Easy Agile t-shirt or a $50 Amazon voucher your way for your time and feedback. So hopefully that little hack helped.
Thanks, Tegan. So final question, and actually another team member from, I think, Jean's team. Is there a plan to allow increasing epic size in the increment view versus roadmap only?
Great question, Roman. Thank you for that. So we don't specifically have that on our roadmap. However, I wanted to share a bit about how we're thinking about the roadmap and how we're wanting to make it more intuitive and useful for you in ceremonies outside of PI planning. And we're looking to do that in our next development cycle. So your feedback on this is really important, but I wanted to share what we're thinking at the moment. We conducted a host of user testing at the end of last year. And the main issue that came through with updating the roadmap was the frequency at which the product owner needed to do this, so that the epic or feature, whatever, however you're referring to the roadmap issue level, so that the feature or epic position on the roadmap actually reflected what sprints the linked stories had been planned in by the team. And as a result of this, the release train engineers and stakeholders were finding that there were little to no value in the program roadmap because they didn't trust that where the epic or feature was sitting actually reflected the reality of where the team had planned the work. So up next on our roadmap, we're looking to improve the automatic update position of the roadmap issues based on either their start or end date, or by updating the position based on what sprints their linked stories have been planned in. So Elizabeth is currently fleshing that out with our team and with our customers today. So Roman or anyone else on the call, if you had anything else that you think we should be considering, or any other issues that you're experiencing with the roadmap that you'd like to provide your feedback on, now is the perfect time, because we're looking into improving that experience for you today. So hopefully one of those scenarios, Roman, means that you don't need to continuously update your roadmap. Yeah, so I would really love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure Elizabeth is really excited to hear what suggestions you have as well.
And Ron, welcome to the call. I can see that you've just joined us now. And Ron's our first question off the rank. So he has asked, how do we baseline the result of a PI meeting and monitor the PI progress against the baseline?
Okay, great. Good question. Thanks, Ron. Welcome to the call. So Easy Agile Programs introduces 2 new custom fields when it's installed into a Jira instance. So they are the program and the program increment custom field. When we look at what a program increment is in the context of Jira, we identify it as a container for sprints. And when we look at what a program is, we look at the program being a container of program increments. So the way that those fields are populated is they're populated on any issue that has been scheduled into a sprint that belongs to a program increment. And so what we found our users will do in order to set a baseline for that PI planning meeting is they'll use these 2 custom fields to write a JQL search to understand what was committed at the end of their 2-day PI planning session. And then they'll run the same query at the end of the PI, and they'll look at the delta between what was committed versus what was delivered. So I think Caitlin is going to share a link to one of our docs that will walk you through those JQL functions. If you're already familiar with them, then they might be useful for somebody else on the call. Alternatively, for Agile release trains where all of the teams are using shared sprints in Jira, We've also seen our customers use the standard reporting in Jira, so particularly the sprint report or the burn down report to see what was committed, whether any scope was introduced after the sprints had started, and what we were able to deliver as well. So the sprint report does provide that functionality to show you when issues were added after a sprint had started. With all that being said, we've heard from many release train engineers that we've spoken to through customer interviews and user testing that reporting is manual and is hard for them to do in general. And the two suggestions that I did mention, they also require some manual toing and froing to capture a baseline of the planning. And so with that being said, we're really hoping to introduce reporting into Easy Agile programs in the first half of this year. And we would really love to get some more insight into some of your use cases and how we might be able to provide some more value in the reporting space. So our programs product manager, Elizabeth, is on the call, and she's actively investigating at the moment how we could better provide value to you in a reporting sense. So if you'd be willing to provide some feedback, if you could let us know, Ron, or anybody else in the comments, we'll have Elizabeth reach directly out to you, and we'll send you a $50 Amazon voucher or a free Easy Agile t-shirt to say thanks. But definitely something we're investigating and wanting to help you out with. So hopefully we can deliver on that within the next few months.
Well, that's all of our pre-submitted questions. So whether you've joined us live or you've missed the call and are watching us on recording, thanks for submitting your questions. It's really valuable to us to know what you as our customers think of our product, and we are more than happy to help. Starting with future Ask Us Anything sessions. So if you've got any feedback, given this was our first one, we'd love to hear that, how we can improve this, whether or not you need the questions to be answered live, or whether the time works for you. Let us know, anything and everything. We're all ears, and hopefully you've gotten some unique insights from Tegan today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.